Good morning and welcome on this beautiful fall morning. I'm a lay leader here, Paula Herbert. We're a lay-led congregation, and today we welcome Rebecca Brown as our guest to speak to us on a good death. Rebecca comes with a varied career. She authored Women on High, Pioneers of Mountaineering, and she was instrumental in the founding of the Ammonoosuc Conservation Trust, which has done so much good work in conserving our lands. But today she comes to us representing the New Hampshire Alliance for End-of-Life Options, a concern for many of us as we deal with the end of life for our families, our friends, and ourselves. We look forward to hearing her later in the service. Are there any announcements this morning? Sandy.
I just wanted to talk about, there's a adopt a family this year. We were contacted by a family who pretty much lost everything in a house fire, and they are staying with friends in Franconia, and they asked for help. They have 6 children, so there's a tree out there that I've put their ages of the children and their sizes, and if you can help out, we really appreciate it. And if you could drop off the gifts here or at my house or Wednesday supper by December 8th.
Thank you. And there's a sign-up sheet there to let us know who has taken which tag. Are there other announcements? Bill?
I don't know how many of you know Natalia Goodsman. She is celebrating her birthday today. She's sweet 16, and she has come to our community from Honduras, making the trek, and is currently seeking with the rest of her family asylum. I'm sharing this with you because we as a church have been instrumental over the years in the creation of our North Country community as a more diverse community with people of different races, different cultures, coming together and sojourning with us, sometimes for a long time, and sometimes for just a year or 2. But we've been blessed with all of us who have come over the some 40, 45 years that I've been involved in this congregation. Natalia, over the last couple of weeks, has received from a young man in a attending Profile, I would call it hate literature or hate commentary. The language is vile, it's extreme racist, so bad that it kept Natalia home from school for 3 or 4 days. And other people in the community have tried to address this problem by going to the administration of Profile and raising issues about, well, what is the school going to do about this? Well, to date, the school isn't going to do, to my knowledge, anything about it. And without addressing these kinds of problems, looking at the events of the last week, without addressing these issues, they don't go away. They just fester. And in fact, they maybe even grow. And so I debated whether to lift this issue before you during the announcements or during the prayer concerns. But I think that we need to hold our community in our thoughts and in our prayers, and we need to do everything we can to help our young people become more open to and accepting of the diversity that is our world community, and will be, whether it is tomorrow or next year or 15, 20 years from now, will be our community as well, because we will become, as our world is becoming, a diverse place where people of many backgrounds, many cultures, and many colors will live together. And instead of creating a future where there's hatred and disdain and hurtful commentary to other people who are our neighbors, let's hope and pray for a world where people live together in harmony and learn from each other and grow together.
Thank you, Bill. Sad to hear that in our community, that sort of hatred and racism exists. Are there other announcements? Yes, Robert.
Stop so you can hear it. We'll be hosting an old-fashioned Christmas on the outdoors on the afternoon of Sunday, December 12th. So that and other events for Advent and Christmas are on the back of your bulletin. You can look at the calendar of upcoming events. A number of things trying to invite the community for Advent and for Christmas Eve service, which will also be outdoors.
Thank you, Robert. Susan, do you have an announcement?
I want to talk about the book study. They started a book called Luke. It's written by Max Lucado. We're in the second week, finished the second week. And it's divided into 12 different sections, so we're into 12 weeks, but we're only going to do 6 weeks before Christmas because I don't want to get involved in Advent or Christmas and people are really busy at Christmas time. So we're going to stop for a break around the middle of December. We'll come back together in the first week of January. If you haven't been, if you've taken a book and haven't managed to get to the class is at 1 o'clock on Tuesdays. It has been really interesting to learn about the people to study. The study is not just about the Bible. There are reflections for people in their own lives and what the different chapters mean to them. And we get to talk to each other and about our lives, which has been really, really interesting for me and a really good thing. So if you took a book and you haven't been to the study yet, don't worry, you can still come because every week is a different week. So we'll be on week 3 this week on Tuesday at 1 o'clock. So if you want to show up, please do.
Thank you. Are there other announcements? Well, after church, we invite you to come in. There's some soup and sandwiches and coffee and cider if you just want to have a chit-chat about ideas that perhaps come up from the service. And around 11:45, the mission board will convene back in the sanctuary for a meeting. One of the things that I'm bringing to the mission board is small acts. You may have seen this little poster at different businesses or received a small act, and I'm looking for our mission board to adopt small acts and perhaps bring up some creative ideas on how to show kindness to others, although we do already a lot of it, as you probably know, at this church. And then on the following Monday, I'm going to be going to the Select Board of Franconia and asking them to adopt the initiative as a town. And Bethlehem has done this, and I believe North Conway has done it. I think Bethlehem was the first community to do it. And so anyone who wants to come to that meeting, it's at 6 o'clock. To show your support for this initiative, please do. And I'll have some postcards out on the outside on the little table there where the tree is and where Rebecca's sign-up sheet is. And you're welcome to pick up a postcard because it gives you information on the back and it gives you the website to visit. So that will be after service for the mission board, and as I said, anyone is welcome to attend that. If there are no other announcements, let us turn to our call to worship. And this call to worship comes from a UCC resolution, resolution of witness it was called, on the legalization of physician aid in dying. And they call that on the grounds of compassion and choice, if strict safeguards to prevent abuse are followed, a terminally ill and mentally competent adult should have the legal right to request and receive medication from a willing physician to hasten death if the patient finds his or her suffering to be unbearable. Now, this resolution of witness came from 2007. The UC asking the Synod to move ahead on these concepts, and the UCC has continued. And I sent an article out with the announcement that you could read from some of the pastors. So this is an important dialogue for our church and for us, of course, as members of a community here. So let us have our call to worship. Life is both a sacred and perishable gift from God. God intends that created life be more than simply the existence of human beings. Faith sees death as a door into another room in God's house. Compassion, love acted out, flows from the heart of God and through God's children. From the beginning of our lives to life everlasting, God leads us, sustains us, and is always with us. Let us turn to our chalice hymnal, which is sometimes red and sometimes blue in these pews, number 577, Near My God to Thee.
Jesus was asked of all the law, what was the most important? Let us read together his reply. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the great and first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments, that all the law and the prophets. I find that fairly easy to read, much more difficult to live out on a daily basis. Let us confess together. Oh, loving God, we confess that we do not always love our neighbors as ourselves, that at times we fear death and approach the end of life with trepidation. Please forgive us. Amen. We look to the cross, which reminds us of Jesus' sacrifice. He paid the price so that all of our sins might be forgiven. Amen. Amen. Well, we used to go around and shake hands and give hugs to each other, but we're still trying to ward off the pandemic. So let's just give a sign of peace to each other from where we are. And let us sing together, creating me a clean heart. enter our time of prayer with reading the prayer list, and we'll all read together the names that are in bold. Today we pray for the families and friends of these people who recently passed away. Jeff Whitcomb, Valerie Allen, Ted Garney, William Jeffco. And we pray for these people in need. Lincoln Daniel Anderson, Rita Farrell, Phyllis Cole, Chuck Bassett, Glenn Jeffco, Ken Ford, Harry Chapman, Don Conjuro, Caitlin Wilkinson, and baby girl Addison James, Susan Strong, Kurt Lewis. Now have a time for you all to address other prayers and concerns, and we'll follow each one with the words, Lord, hear our.
I'd like continued prayers for Gary Young and the family of Carol. May they find some comfort in each other.
Lord, hear our prayer.
I'd like to say thank you for people in the church from last week. I also want to know that my husband's concussion has gone away. He's able to walk again safely, and I'm so happy.
Lord, hear our prayer. Let us now spend some time in silence as we contemplate those prayers which have not been spoken aloud to. Now let us all join together and read the Lord's Prayer as He is taught. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. We now ask for your support financially. We require those contributions also to continue the work of this. Thank you for these gifts, and we pray the Lord will bless their use here at Franconia Community Church. Amen.
Amen.
Our scripture reading comes from Luke. Lost more earrings this year. Luke 10:29 through 37. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem." This is the one we read last week. We have a new one, Bob? Oh well. This is the story of the Good Samaritan, which I know you all know. And so we'll go for it again. And Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stopped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend.' Which of the 3, do you think, was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" He said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." And last week, Bill talked about his work with a particular woman, Frances, who now lives in Whitefield. And one of the things he said struck me. He said, because he kept crossing the road, trying not to help her. She was begging on the street in Yarrow. Every time he came, she was after him. And he said, her story became my story. Amen.
Well, I just mentioned too that we had the same meeting last week, so I looked at when I was putting the book together, and thinking about talking about care, and I thought, well, saw it the same, and said, well, that kind of works for this week too, so I think we'll be good. And anyways, our next hymn is My Life Goes On, number 619, The Dead from the Child's. invite the students to join us.
Hey, Robert. Robert, you mind raising? Wait, nothing that high. Thank you. Thanks. And good morning, and I'm so delighted to be invited to come and talk to you about like our biggest cultural taboo. The one that we're like most afraid of talking about because it makes us feel so fearful, like we don't have the right answers, we try to avoid it, and makes us feel most vulnerable. And that, of course, is death. So I was asked to come and talk about the New Hampshire Alliance for End-of-Life Options, and also a little bit my own work with Heart and Soul Transitions, which is very personal work on this topic. And I'm going to talk about both, but I'm going to start with the personal and then get to policy and rights, the Alliance's work. I'm going to talk about the rights we have, that we believe we have as humans, but are not recognized yet in our state, and that is the right of autonomy to our own bodies and the right to make end-of-life choices for ourselves. But I didn't come to this place or answer this call of caring deeply about this issue because of policy. It's because of very personal experience. I'm going to share some of that. And as much as I believe in personal autonomy and self-determination and the right to make our own choices, we live in community, and our ways of making meaning are in relation to each other, not just to ourselves. So I just want to do a quick check-in and just ask you, how many of us actually know we're going to die someday? John doesn't. And, you know, as much as we know it, I think that often it's kind of in our heads. And we have occasion sometimes to actually feel it. And if you don't mind, I'd like to lead us in a little exercise to actually try to have a glimpse of bringing that feeling from our rational heads and down into our bodies and actually into our hearts. So this is to first settle into our space here and leave the concerns that we brought outside the door and what we're going to do next outside the door, and just really settle into this space. And feel your seat on the bench, your back on the bench, and your feet on the floor. And I invite you to actually close your eyes to do this. It's really bringing attention to our bodies and the feeling of support through the bench, through our feet, down through the floor, the basement, into the foundation, and right into the earth itself. Just feel ourselves being supported by the earth. And now bring your focus to your feet. Feel your feet on the floor. Really feel your feet. You might wiggle your toes, move your feet around a little bit. If you dare, you could even take your shoe off and give your foot a little love, a little massage. Or you could feel it through your shoe too. But really think of where your feet have taken you. All the millions of steps, the countless places, from your little toddler feet, the first time you actually took a step upright, to now. Millions of steps. Maybe they've walked you out each morning to your garden. Maybe they've walked you down the aisle with your beloved. Maybe they've carried you up and down mountains, down Cannon Mountain. Maybe they've walked you into your child's room. It's kind of easy to take them for granted, our feet, because they're always there. They're always with us. They're our foundation. They're literally how we walk the earth. It's with these feet. So just sit with a feeling of gratitude for our feet and appreciation for all they've done for us. And now, feeling that gratitude and deep appreciation for our feet, say goodbye to them. Say goodbye to your feet. Say goodbye as if this is the last time you will ever see them. How's that make you feel? What do you notice in your body? And open your eyes. Does knowing this is the last time you'll see your feet make you appreciate them more? Want to care for them more? It's a funny little exercise, and I invite you to try this at home with any of your body parts. And feel what it's like to say goodbye to a part of you. Any of your body parts, even to your mind, anything you hold dear. And you can take it to more things of what we do. What would it feel like to be brushing your teeth for the last time? Or loading the dishwasher for the last time? Or kissing your spouse or your partner or your child for the last time? It's an interesting practice to pick one thing, however mundane or however profound, and feeling, what would it be like? What would I do? How would I do it if I knew it was the last time? And here's another way to make the reality of death less abstract. How would it change your day-to-day life if you knew you had 10 years to live? Or 5 years to live? Or 1 year to live? What would you cultivate and what would you discard? What if you had only a month? And what if you knew today? What if you knew today was the last day of your life? How would you want to experience it? What's the quality of experience that you would want? And what do I mean by quality of experience? It's such an individual thing, but for me, it's where I find joy and immersion, deep satisfaction, beauty, awe. It's dropping the chatter in my head and experiencing deep focus and connection. And I invite you to spend some time with that question. If you knew you had X amount of time left, what would be your priorities? What are the qualities of experience that you value most, that you would want to experience most? How would you devote your time, your finite time? And write these down. Add to them as you think of them, and I guarantee you this will be useful to you and to those who matter most to you. As part of this question, we might also list the people that we are most important to us, so that we might actually tell them why and how they've been important. We might list the people that we want to ask forgiveness of or offer forgiveness to and reconcile with. We might list the people we'd like to spend more time with or get to know better. We might also think about our stories, the stories that help others learn something about themselves and their own lives and choices. The stories of what we've done well and are proud of, the things that bring us joy, what gives us meaning, and also the things we would have done differently. The mistakes we've made, what we've learned, the experiences that changed us, that shaped us, good and bad. The difficult stuff that shows our full humanity and shows other people they can be fully human and imperfect too. All these stories are our legacy, and it's what we leave those who come after us, the stories that only we can tell. Witnessing the deaths of some people very close to me, including my mother and my husband, convinced me there have to be more sane and humane ways to approach the end of life. For us as individuals, for us as a culture, and that part of that humanity and sanity is actually talking about death. And talking about and accepting, even embracing, the real certainty of our own death so that we may live more fully. When I talk about death, I'm talking about living life fully as we can for as long as we're here in the ways that are most meaningful to us. And this is personal and interior and relational and very hard work. It's also completely aligned with the ability to live life fully and know what we want at life's end. And part of this work, maybe the hardest part, is realizing we can't control everything. We can't control everything, but I do believe we all can have the choice to bring awareness and intention around our mortality. Or we can stay with the majority culture and deny it and deflect it and ignore it and fear it. I'm going to shift now to talk about the New Hampshire Alliance for End-of-Life Options and the growing national movement to change our culture around death. Some call it the death positive movement. Death positive because it's bringing light into this area of our lives, bringing death back into our lives, into our homes. And it's not just the dying part, it's also how we plan for it and talk about it, how we want to be treated after our deaths. So things like green burial and home funerals, and also life celebrations before we're dead. Death positive because it can help lessen the anxiety, the misunderstandings and the disagreements and the hurt feelings. Because we're talking about more honesty, more truth, more love, more fully living, along with the acceptance that we can't control everything and that life and death can be messy and cruel. We started the New Hampshire Alliance for End-of-Life Options because we believe there must be more sane and humane ways of approaching end of life. Our work has 3 key points. First is the importance of talking about death with more open and honest conversations and communication. Second is our power as consumers of healthcare, our power, all of ours, to demand change in how we're treated, and that making medical aid in dying is an option for New Hampshire people. That's our third big point, empowering people. Now I'll just describe each of these in turn. So first is the importance of understanding ourselves and what we value, what I began talking about, that interior work. That's so we can have more open and honest conversations with those who matter most. It means the willingness and confidence to engage in some of the most challenging and profound conversations we'll have in our lives. Good talk can strengthen relationships. It can bring meaning and reconciliation and insight. We die alone in a literal sense, but most of us will have, hopefully, people around us who matter tremendously to us. And how we approach our dying, that will leave a lasting impression on all those people. It will become part of our story, a really important part. The Alliance wants to encourage these conversations. We will be holding and facilitating community conversations on topics around death and dying, about how we plan for and how we talk about what we want at the end. The conversations will be practical and potentially transformational. We have an agenda. We want people to actually do the things that will help them to be better prepared, like having those challenging conversations and doing your advance directives. We'll bring lawyers and physicians and hospice people and other experts in the field to talk about topics, but our approach is really peer-to-peer, just regular old folks, educated and doing education and outreach. It's really community-based and grassroots. The second key point of our mission is that we believe that we all have latent power as consumers of healthcare to change the medical system. We can demand that it be more responsive to our needs, our values, and our concerns. That requires a cultural shift within healthcare. And thankfully, we have hospice and palliative care here in our region, but too many people don't have access to these services, and too many people don't really understand what they are at all. So in fact, the number of people on hospice and the number of days that they're in hospice is very small. There's a great misunderstanding about the services, and there's also limitations to what they can actually do. Because for many people, the greatest fear about dying is not physical pain. Their biggest fears are psychic or emotional or spiritual. I hope you had a chance to read the article that Paula sent out, A Word to the Church on End-of-Life Care. It was a terrific article. It was written in 2009, so it's factually dated, which I'll get to in a minute. But the questions and the issues are all spot on. It names 3 important questions of bioethics. What is wrong? What can we do? What can we do? And what ought we to do? What ought we to do? And that's the challenge of technology. The authors write, and I quote, "The technologies intended to help us may end up harming us if we do not provide appropriate ethical and spiritual guidance. Many of today's bioethical challenges are the result of our successes and not our failures. Medical technology has been a factor in increasing both longevity and quality of life. We are called to celebrate medical technology as a manifestation of God's aim at healing and wholeness, and it is a continuation of Jesus' healing ministry. Nevertheless, we must also recognize that many persons today have fallen victim to the technology aimed at helping them." End quote. Some people in medicine today call it the conveyor belt of technology. Once you get on the treatment train, it's really hard to get off. Anything less than using all available treatments is seen as giving up, disappointing our loved ones, and disappointing our physicians. Death itself is seen as some kind of failure. I want to tell you a quick story about my mother and father. My mother was pretty deep into Alzheimer's and was at a so-called memory care facility. She'd been there only a couple of weeks because my father had actually cared for her at home for many years. So one night, as we all knew she would, she got up and started wandering around in the middle of the night. She tripped and fell, broke her hip, hit her head, was bleeding in the brain. So my father got that 1:30 a.m. phone call, the one we all dread. And it said, "Your wife has fallen, here's her condition, we want to airlift her to a bigger hospital so that she can be evaluated for brain surgery." So he had that moment to make a decision, and that anguished choice. And his response was basically, "Are you insane? Why would you take an 86-year-old woman deep into Alzheimer's and take her away from what's familiar to something totally confusing and frightening, to think about brain surgery?" So he said, "No, I don't want that. Don't move her. Keep her comfortable and safe." And so they said, in that case, she's eligible for hospice. And he agreed. When he got to the hospital a little while later, a nurse pulled him aside and said, "You made the right choice." And I thank God for that nurse. And I'm not here to tell you, and the Alliance isn't here to say what's the right choice in a case like that. Because there's no right or wrong. It's up to each of us to decide. But I implore you to have the conversation about that kind of eventuality. Have it now. Have it before that 1 a.m. phone call. And if you are a medical proxy or a medical power of attorney for someone else, understand now what they want. Really dig into these hard questions so that you understand their values, their concerns, what they're willing to live with and what they're not. Because that, when you sign up to be the proxy, you're representing them. It's what they want, whether you agree or not. And I'm not here, and the Alliance isn't here to say whether treatments are good or bad. We're here to say that as consumers of healthcare, we need to have the ability to make informed decisions, shared decisions based on our values and principles and faith. If you want to pursue every treatment option that's out there, go for it. We support that right. But if you want to opt out of that, we support your right to do that with a clear conscience without feeling like a failure. Deciding for ourselves what is most important and what we're willing to live with, the compromises we're willing to make, and those we're not, these are profound questions. And the way we answer them changes over time. Everyone should have advance directives. That's the form that says, if I can no longer speak for myself, this is what I want. And this is what I don't want to have happen to me. It's essential that we all do this. The worst thing is to leave your family, your loved ones, those who care most for you, with an unclear idea of what you want. That leads to disagreements. It can be chaotic. I'm sure some of you have been there. It's pretty awful. At the time, you want your family and those who matter most to you to be in harmony and actually just with you. You don't want conflict. That's why talking about this stuff way ahead of time is so important. There's no better time to start talking than now, at any age and at any physical condition. And I want to tell you, I'm doing this work and feel called to this because I know what it's like not to have those conversations. I know what it feels like to have that anguish of not knowing or not having adequate conversations about what our loved ones want and what they're facing and what they're really feeling. If I can help anyone else avoid that kind of pain, then this work will be successful. Our third major emphasis is policy, and we will advocate for empowering people to be able to make the best end-of-life decisions for themselves. And the single biggest policy change that we can make in New Hampshire to empower people is to legalize medical aid in dying. Since that UCC article in 2009, 9 states and the District of Columbia have joined Oregon in legalizing medical aid in dying, and those include Maine and Vermont. The laws are very specific about who qualifies. They are also very specific in stating that medical aid in dying is not suicide. Medical aid in dying is a choice made by people about when and with whom they will die, not if they will die, because they're already dying. It is not physician-assisted suicide, and sometimes you'll hear that term. It's inaccurate. The only assistance that a physician gives is writing the prescription. But you, as an individual, must be able to ingest the cocktail yourself. You must be able to do that. You must be mentally competent. You must be over the 18 years of age. You must live in the state where the medical aid in dying is legal. And you must be diagnosed as being terminal within 6 months with the judgment of 2 physicians. As an organization and as the individuals who came together to form it, we have some real fundamental questions about the laws in these other states, about how accessible they are for people, and I'm happy to talk with anyone about that afterwards. But I just want to stick with the laws as proposed now. And I'm going to illustrate what's possible in some states and what is impossible here in New Hampshire with 2 stories. And then I'll get to what we might do as individuals and as a congregation. And I lost my place, so give me just a moment to come back to my story. I know it's here somewhere, or else I'm just going to ad-lib it, and that'll be just fine too. So the 2 stories are these. The first is about a man named Al Gelati, and his wife Susan. And the second is about a man named Frank. And both I have permission to give you their full names from each. So Al and Susan Gelati were married 56 years and traveled the world. Al was a banker, Susan a psychotherapist. and they retired to Vermont in 2007. And 4 years later, Al was diagnosed with brain cancer. And this man who was, in addition to being a very successful business person, was a talented chef, a published novelist, and a wonderful landscape photographer. But as his disease progressed, he began to lose his ability to use his hands. He couldn't walk. He began to lose what was most important and vital in his life, what gave him value and joy and meaning. He began to lose all that except for Susan, who was with him at his side during the entire time. And when the tumor came back, the physicians finally said to Al, we really don't have anything left to do. We've got 3 to 6 months to live. So Al made the choice that in September 18th of 2018, Al decided that would be his last day. And because Vermont has medical aid in dying, it is legal, Al was able to make that choice. So Al and Susan and their minister, 2 dear friends, and a hospice nurse were all together when Al died. Susan describes that as a beautiful experience, a profound one for everyone there, giving them all peace of mind. And Susan, who's become a close friend and colleague in this work, is here today. And I'm sure we'd be happy to discuss that afterwards. So contrast that story with Frank. Frank Leva lives in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Frank is a retired engineer from Boston. He and his wife rebuilt a house right on the shore of Great Bay. And he's in his early 70s, retired a few years ago. They've been traveling and enjoying grandchildren and all the things we want to do when we get to that point. And then Al started feeling some headaches and dizziness. Frank was. And Frank was diagnosed with brain cancer, the same as Al. Frank desperately wants to have the option to choose when and with whom and where he dies. But he's afraid that medical aid in dying will not come soon enough for him in New Hampshire. Frank actually visualizes himself driving into a tree. He is willing to share his story, and we'll be telling that story through our work, in order that other people might learn from it and to try to move the needle on this issue, whether it happens in time for him or not. And I'm certainly committing my time and energy to make it happen for Frank and others like him, because I've heard many stories like Frank's. So I'm going to conclude by referring back to the UCC article that Paula sent. It points to what we as individuals can do and what I invite you as a congregation to consider doing in partnership with us in the Alliance. The article reads, quote, "Caring for the dying begins long before the diagnosis of a terminal illness. It begins with education and spiritual formation within the congregation. Congregations are called to be places where life and death issues are discussed without denial or judgment. The goal of these educational initiatives is not uniformity of belief or action, but well thought out preparatory responses. Our calling is to enable persons to reflect on their deepest desires and make decisions regarding appropriate health care as they face their own death. This is the meaning of love in action." I would love to explore what this could mean for us as individuals and in working with you as a congregation. I have a sign-up sheet on the table outside for the Alliance, and also some cards and pamphlets if any of you would like to talk with me individually about where you find yourselves. So thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. I've always enjoyed speaking here around conservation and the earth and all that kind of stuff. And this is really a new venture, and I feel like I'm finding my voice in this, and I really appreciate any feedback you can give me about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final hymn is In Christ There Is No East or West, number 687, and the child's.
Our benediction comes from Paul's letter to the Romans, 8:38-39. For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ our Lord. Go in peace. Serve the Lord.
How are you?
See you.
Robert, about how many people